Howdy folks, still at this same site where I've made a video on Angophora floribunda, Eucalyptus boweriana on the river flats of the Georges River at Hammondville. We've got a parkland, but we've got some nice remnant trees which we can show off and profile in the parkland. I have hesitated to make a video on this one, and that's because they can be a little bit tricky. They can be the bane of everyone's existence, although we do get comfortable with them in certain parts of New South Wales. This is the beautiful forest red gum, Eucalyptus tereticornis or tereticornis. That botanical name means sort of tubular horn, and it refers to the operculum or the calyptra or the opercula on the bud caps on the flowers. It's a beautiful forest red gum. To start to ID it, the bark can be a little bit variable, but you can get these really broad plates. Oh, why bother pulling any off? I'll pick up one off the ground. Check that out. And that's heavy. It's really heavy. You know, don't want to overstate it, but if you gave someone a whack on the head with that, it's, yeah, you might just do them in. But it's like this platey bark, big plates, and then you sort of go to a mixture of really thin fibres. You get these coarse, chunky bits here. It sort of varies, but you certainly get these plates on it that you can almost sort of pull off. It's very chunky, but then it goes really thin, and you know, there's nothing. Remember, it's a red gum, and here you get nothing I can pull off at all. Here it's more like punctata or amplifolia or one of those, maybe like a spotted gum. You just can't pull anything off there. But here we've got these coarse fibres. It's all very uneven. Up here there's a huge plate that's about to come off. I just can't get to it, but you can see that's a huge plate. So they just shed all this uneven, messy bark. Sometimes you can sort of tell them by their bark what they're doing. You can tell them from a distance, but it's all a bit messy. When you go up the trunk, you then go into these white or creamy white or grey branches up in the trunk or up in the canopy. So you do transition to these white sort of branches. They can be big trees. They can easily be 40 metres. You do get some big ones in Western Sydney. I've never really seen 40-metre ones, but I have seen them around 25, maybe 30 metres. If they're big old ones in Western Sydney, they can get a really fat trunk. I've seen some well over a metre across at DBH, diameter breast height, the arborist measure. I've seen them over probably pushing $1.50 if they're nice and big. One thing to look for, the canopy has a bluish green hue to it. The leaves are bluish green. They're not normally straightforward green. They've got a good hint of blue in them. And that's what I always look for with tereticornis. Now, that doesn't stack up all the time. It stacks up nicely in Sydney, but I'm told when you get up further north in Australia, the leaves can be very green. But in Western Sydney, generally, and I do get them around my way in the south of Sydney, but they're very limited because normally they will be on alluvial or shale soils. They don't really like the sandstone all that much, although I have been in some parts of New South Wales where they're growing on sandstone, but it was sort of basalt-enriched sandstone. But I don't really associate them with sandstone, but it's got a very wide range and it's on a range of soil types, so it can always buck the trends. But in Western Sydney, it's on the alluvial and the shale country. This one's got some beautiful buds on it, and I'll just show those. Just the rough geographic range. Eucalyptus tereticornis, it's big. It's a big geographic range, although it doesn't go inland to a great degree like some of the other eucalypts here. It gets into the tablelands of New South Wales and it just pushes into the western slopes around in the Hunter Valley. Probably areas like Singleton and around there. And in that area around Singleton, it's notorious for integrating with another red gum called Eucalyptus blakeleyi. That's Blakely's red gum. The red gums are a complicated group, like the ironbarks and like the stringy barks. They're a bit of a complicated group. No surprise, being eucalyptus. They go into the Hunter Valley. They don't go too much further west than that. They go right up and down the New South Wales coast. They go into eastern Victoria, and then they come around to Melbourne. They stop at about the Melbourne area and I think north of. In Queensland, they go right up to north of Cairns, not quite into the Cape York Peninsula, but right up to north of Cairns. And they're a little bit variable over their range. As you go further west in New South Wales, the tereticornis sort of gets replaced with species like blakeleyi and dwyeri and dillbarta. They're the other ones that are in the group. And in some of those parts, when on the fringe of the tereticornis range, tereticornis will integrate with blakeleyi, possibly with dillbarta as well. But all the red gums show this massive amount of integration, which gives everyone a bit of trouble, including me. Definitely me. Tereticornis can have these really long leaves. When I say really long, well, pushing over 20 centimetres. And look, I don't have a ruler here, but I reckon that leaf dangling there is just over 20 centimetres or thereabouts. Maybe about 3 centimetres, possibly a bit wider. I haven't got the juvenile leaves here. I might try and find a seedling in the bush over there, possibly. The juvenile leaves are massive. They're these huge blue-green things. They're very different to the adult foliage. I'm going to walk around that edge and try and find some for us. I reckon they're bluey-green. They have a real good bluey-green hue, and that's what I'm always looking for when I look at a tereticornis. I'm looking for these bluey-green leaves. Just got them in the sun now. They're real genuine eucalypts. They remind me a little bit of Tasmanian blue gum leaves, which are longer. But they're a nice, genuine bookmark, good bookmark leaf, tereticornis. They are another eucalypt that's considered to be a preferred koala tree. So koalas do like getting into them. As far as I know, the leaves are concolorous. Don't think tereticornis, no, they're not discolorous, they're well and truly concolorous. I think the red gums, by and large, have concolorous leaves. Well and truly the same shade on either side. Nice yellow midvein, nice yellow petiole in this particular example. And they tend to, a lot of tereticornis, when they're nice and big and old, maybe they hang down, the leaves hang down. They've got this nice sort of pendulous habit. The tree can be a bit uneven. They can be all over the shop. They don't have to be a straight up and down tall tree, you know, like something like Fastigata perhaps. You can see this one's pretty wonky, but it's got a nice broad canopy. They are a titan. They're a nice heavy tree, but they can sort of lean about all over the place. They don't have to go straight up. Some of them do, but they'll have sort of, you know, they have uneven branching and they're a bit more of a messy tree. And then one of the cool things is these buds, but I have to say straight away, the buds are incredibly variable. They're variable in shape and size. And we've got a great book written by a bloke called Van Klapaka who used to run eucalypt workshops, and he's got a book of sketches of eucalypt species, and he shows the variation in tereticornis buds. They can be very variable. In this particular one, it's showing that tereticornis name really well. It's got this tubular horns looking calyptra on, yeah, just on top of the hypanthium there. It's sort of, I guess it's longer than the hypanthium, I would think. and it's meant to be like a horn, sort of like a, you know, triceratops or maybe a rhinoceros horn or something like that. Tereticornis means tubular horn. Maybe I can just pinch that operculum off. Let's have a go. It's probably not ready to go yet, I wouldn't think. They're probably still ripening up. I don't know what the prime flowering time is. Yeah, I can't really get it off. It's well and truly fused on there. I think I just ripped off the whole flower. It was nowhere near ready to go. But now they're described as being I think they're described as being mostly in 7s, but they can be in 11 or even 15. So they can go 7 to 11 to 15. One of the things I've learned in my career is in Western Sydney, at least, they tend to be in 7s. So they tend to be regularly in 7s. You know, that one's lost one, but they tend to be in 7s quite consistently. And I like that for tereticornis. Just a 7-flowered umbellasters, but do note across its range it'll get into 11s, I believe, and into 15s as well, I think. So in that bracket, it doesn't go beyond that bracket. It doesn't go beyond the 7 to 15s, but I sort of like the 7s when I get them. It makes me more comfortable that I've got tereticornis and I haven't got a thing we wrestle with called amplifolia, and I've got to make a video on that too. Amplifolia is a cabbage gum, which has some differing features that people sort of latch onto, but they can be very similar. So you can see those well-spaced buds. 7, beautiful 7, we like that. It's got a long peduncle, maybe 10 to 20 mil. Pedicels maybe are going to be something like 5 to 10 mil, something like that. Nice bluey green leaves. And yeah, I don't know if I finished saying that. It is a koala favourite. It's another koala preferred tree. Like punctata, that's what they go for. I made a bit of a mess here, getting some material down. Again, you never get everything you want. We're in a stage where we have plenty of buds and hardly any fruit. And I find this with tereticornis, you even get one or the other. You get buds or you get fruit. But here's the fruit. Not the best example, but here they are. Just can't get any nice fresh ones. But this is a typical, what we'd call red gum fruit. It's got a nice raised steep disc, and those valves are well and truly coming out. It's very sort of globular. A sort of hemispherical hypanthium, and then it's got another hemispherical disc with the valves. And that's what we call a typical red gum fruit. It'll be in a cluster of 7, obviously. I've only got 2 left here. And you got that nice raised disc, exerted valves. And if they're nice and big like that, again, I'm comfortable with tereticornis. I find amplifolia, they tend to be smaller. And amplifolia, you more commonly get clusters of 11 or maybe more, but up to 11. But that's the thing for tereticornis. Just note tereticornis, there's a lot of subspecies. Probably with that geographic range, you do get subspecies. I've got some fruit here, which are absolutely huge. Well, probably what I'm used to seeing, but they just seem to be really on the big side. These are still on the branch. And again, that's pretty comfortable for tereticornis. Just that steeply raised disc going into the valves there. That's pretty good. There's a lot more to say about this tree. People can talk about its variation. It's subspecies from place to place. It gets on basalt soil. I think there's even a subspecies basaltica or something like that. I forget how many subspecies are mentioned on Euclid. You can see the sprays of buds here. I used to have a tree in the front yard of a place I lived in. When it was in flower, the lawn was covered in opercula. It was just covered. You rolled over them with the lawnmower. So you just saw all these horned bud caps on the ground. Nice long leaves, bluey green. But some people will tell you where they're from, they're very green instead of bluey green. I made a sort of comment in Western Sydney. It sort of tends to more like the drier country, and it will get up the hills, but then it'll well and truly get on the creek lines where Amplifolia likes to hang out. So it's not overly fussy, but if you go up a nice hot dry Western Sydney hill and you're well and truly away from the creek, it's more likely to be tereticornis and it's less likely to be Amplifolia. But that's sort of in Sydney. Once you get out and about, well, I can tell you now, down in Goulburn, I can find Amplifolia up the top of a dry hill. So there's nothing easy about these red gums, and it's hard to put concrete barriers on them, as a lot of ecologists in New South Wales know. But this is a nice, beautiful big one. I have no doubt that most ecologists would hang their hat here that this is tereticornis. You wouldn't be calling this Amplifolia, I don't believe. Even though Amplifolia means ample foliage, it's slightly different to tereticornis, and you just got to get your eye in for both of them. But don't forget the platy bark. I also find Amplifolia, it doesn't have this platy bark. It tends to be more smooth. It tends to be a more smooth white chunk, but this guy just has a lot of platy, I can just pull that off, a lot of platy stuff going on, and all these rough little intermingling bits as well. It's a very interesting tree in terms of its bark. I'm just going to go into the bush and see if I can find any seedlings, just to show you the juvenile foliage. I reckon I might be able to find one or two. Let's just see how we go. I sort of didn't talk about the leaf texture. Just wanted to throw that in for you. Try and be consistent with every video. They're not overly thin, but they're not overly thick either. So I'm not, yeah, they're sort of in between. They're not an overly thickish leaf, but they're not papery thin either, like the Angophora floribunda. I'm folding them over and they're not snapping or anything like that. They've got a bit of flexibility and malleability there. It's sort of in the middle of a thickish and thin leaf. So, sorry, I should have showed you that. I have no doubt this is a tereticornis sapling. I'm pretty positive that it is. The only thing about it is it's nearly snapped off because I think a wattle branch has fallen on top of it. I'd love to get it up so you can see the bark, but I'll show you anyway. Look, it's been snapped over, but that's what juvenile saplings, that's what the bark looks like. It sort of gets the tereticornis sort of colouring going, but it's very thin and there's not a lot of fibrous parts to pull off, but you can pick the saplings when you start to look at the bark and you know they're around. If you know that bigger trees are around, adult trees, you can start to pick the saplings. This is what I mean by some of the juvenile foliage. Let me just grab a little bit of this. This is sort of papery thin, some of this stuff. But this is completely typical for tereticornis juveniles. They get these nice big sort of ovate juveniles. And sometimes they can be really big, 6 centimetres across, even more than that, and sometimes, you know, yeah, 15 centimetres long. They're really big, chunky juvenile leaves. Amplifolia will do this as well, but again, Amplifolia, they'll be very green, very mid-green in the juvenile phase. They have these massive leaves, Amplifolia, but tereticornis has it as well. And they're probably very closely related, and they're blue-green again. They've just got, or in Western Sydney anyway, they got this bluey-green hue. And wherever I pick them up, I just tend to see them bluey-green, but there's no way I've seen them all over their geographic range. Just check out this one. Just huge. I reckon that would be, I'm just trying to, that would be over 6 centimetres wide. I reckon that's over 6 centimetres wide, that one. Maybe they're slightly discolorous in this juvenile phase. They might be, actually. They might be slightly discolorous. But that's what they can turn on. That one is huge. Look, it sort of fills up my hands almost. It's a massive leaf. So that's what they do in the juvenile phase. Unfortunately, it's been squashed by it's a fallen wattle, and I'd like to be able to rescue it, but I don't know if I can. But anyway, I'll see if I can rescue it when I finish the video. But look out for these saplings if you've got adult trees around. There's a difference too with what the stems are doing of tereticornis versus amplifolia. I think amplifolia has some ridges on it, and tereticornis doesn't. Amplifolia's got these noticeable ridges, but I'll make a video on that when I can. But very bluey green, this one in front of me. So that's your beautiful forest red gum. There it is over there, towering next to the playground. And once you got your eye in, you can sort of pick them up as you're walking up to them a lot of the time. Alrighty.